The car to drive in the 1997 Formula One World Championship had to be a Williams Renault, according to all the pundits before the season started. The favourite for the title, Jacques Villeneuve, and he was on pole position for the first race at Melbourne. The reigning world champion Damon Hill retired his arrows before the Grand Prix even started. Villeneuve and his new teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen made up the front row of the grid. Michael Schumacher for Ferrari and David Coulthard of McLaren were on row 2. The season was underway. Villeneuve, so close to a debut win at Melbourne the year before, suddenly found himself down in second place by the first corner. After the first corner, he was out of the race. Irvine, moving across, had bumped into Johnny Herbert, who'd collided with Villeneuve. Irvine had made a great start, but had forgotten to take the first bend. Heinz-Harald Frentzen went into the lead in his first race for Williams. Eddie Irvine retired his Ferrari. Ralf Schumacher, the new boy at Jordan, went out too. There was a lift-off of the wrong kind for the Tyrrell of Jos Verstappen. Heinz-Harald Frentzen in for his first pit stop, the first test of the new season for the Williams crew. David Coulthard followed him in from first place in his new liveried McLaren Mercedes. All of which enabled Jean Alesi to take second place. But to the frustration of the Benetton team, he stayed out on the circuit when he should have been in the pits refuelling. Heinz-Harald Frentzen set the fastest lap, encouraging progress in the very early stages of the new season. David Coulthard and Michael Schumacher. They started together on row 2, and there was still very little to separate them. McLaren and Mercedes, the two teams who were expected to make significant strides during the new season. Michael Schumacher in for his pit stop at the end of lap 50. It was quick, but not quick enough to prevent Frentzen going into second place. But then he lost control of his Williams. The cause, front brake failure. David Coulthard on to a great first place, the second of his career, the first for McLaren for 50 Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher second, Mika Häkkinen third, 2 McLarens in the top 3, but this was David's day.
This is fantastic. This is actually a better feeling than when I won my first Grand Prix for Williams. And I guess I've got Eddie to thank for causing a bit of aggravation at the first corner.
The second Grand Prix of the 17-race series at Sao Paulo in Brazil. When Formula One comes to town, it's fiesta time. Villeneuve on pole again. Michael Schumacher was 0.59 of a second adrift. This was a Ferrari with pace. On the second row, Gerhard Berger for Benetton, Mika Häkkinen for McLaren. Villeneuve set off towards the first corner, hoping to shadow Schumacher, but he found himself pushed for room. Behind them, chaos. Fisichella and Hill tangled. The red flag was shown because Barrichello in the Stewart was still stranded on the grid. Last minute panic at Ferrari. Irvine was tangled up in his safety harness. From the restart, Villeneuve didn't make the most of his second chance, and Michael Schumacher streaked ahead down to the first corner. Häkkinen in the McLaren in third place. Berger in the Benetton followed. Michael Schumacher and Jacques Villeneuve drawing away from the rest of the field. And Villeneuve eventually easing into first place on the main straight. Behind, Heinz-Harald Frentzen was labouring, having started 8th. Berger and Schumacher. Berger taking advantage of some room at that first corner. Villeneuve into the pits to change his Goodyear tyres. Olivier Panis in the Prost, up to second place, running on Bridgestones. Irvine still struggling with that safety harness. Damon Hill had worked his way well up the order, but Schumacher and Berger passed him. Villeneuve in first place. Difficult to believe this was only his 18th Grand Prix. For Gerhard Berger, it was his 198th. The Goodyear runners had to stop twice. Villeneuve came up to lap the Melbourne winner David Coulthard. A fire in Damon Hill's Arrows put him out after running as high as 4th. His former teammate Villeneuve collected his first victory of 1997 and the 5th of his career. Warm congratulations from Gerhard Berger. McLaren the top constructor, Villeneuve and Coulthard tying for the lead in the Drivers' Championship. On the podium, Olivier Panis, the first podium for Prost and for Bridgestone tyres. To Argentina for the 600th Formula One Grand Prix. Villeneuve on pole position again, his 3rd in succession. His Williams teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen with him on the front row. Olivier Panis for Prost and Michael Schumacher on row 2. Panis from the start running wide from that second row, attempting to run clear of the fast starting Ferraris. Villeneuve in first place, avoiding the log jam that was happening behind. Michael Schumacher caught up in it, Rubens Barrichello, and David Coulthard lost a wheel too. It immediately brought out the safety car while the debris was cleared. Michael Schumacher didn't accept that he was yet out of the race. He was hoping for a red flag, but it was not to be. Villeneuve, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Olivier Panis set off from the restart. Damon Hill was also up in the top 6. Williams looked as though they were about to capitalise on Schumacher's absence. McLaren was struggling in midfield. Olivier Panis against Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Prost against Williams. And Prost won the battle when Frentzen slowed. Another blank as far as points for Heinz-Harald Frentzen were concerned, but Panis and Prost kept on pushing. They were not to be outclassed. Alesi and Damon Hill, old adversaries, now dancing partners. Retirement for Panis, left a spectator at a race where he was eyeing the podium. Villeneuve into the pits and out again without losing the lead. Irvine was second until he pitted too. The Jordans were on a collision course and Fisichella came off worse. Ralf Schumacher was able to continue after a checkover. Villeneuve in for another pit stop. This time, Irvine did take over the lead for the first time in his Formula One career, and he was going fastest of all. His pit stop was a chance for Villeneuve again. He took first place and pulled away. Ralf Schumacher up to 3rd, but Fisichella none too pleased with him. Villeneuve in for a 3rd pit stop, and the gap closed. But Irvine could only hope for a Villeneuve mistake, and it never came. There was no way past the Williams. Villeneuve, his 6th victory, equaling the record of his father, Gilles. Fraternal greetings in Parc Fermé. Ralf Schumacher on the podium in only his 3rd Grand Prix and a career best finish for Irvine. At Imola, Bernie Ecclestone, the luminary who's built Formula One into a multi-million-dollar industry. Another pole position for Villeneuve, his 4th in succession. Heinz-Harald Frentzen made it an all-Williams front row for the 3rd time in 1997. Behind them on row 2, Michael Schumacher and Olivier Panis shining again in the Prost. From the start, Villeneuve led Michael Schumacher through the revised Tamburello. Michael Schumacher had been first at Imola in 1994 for Benetton. Now the huge crowd were willing him to repeat in 1997 for Ferrari. A Teutonic duel with Michael Schumacher and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. German reputations at stake. Frentzen with no points from his first 3 Grand Prix for Williams. Berger in his 200th Grand Prix, but that spin was no cause for celebration. And Hill was getting frustrated amongst the back markers and collided with Nakano. Panis failed to live up to the promise of qualifying and was overtaken by Irvine and Fisichella. Michael Schumacher's first stop, followed by Jacques Villeneuve at Williams. This left Heinz-Harald Frentzen in the lead. until he too was called into the pits for refuelling and new tyres. Back out on the circuit, and Michael Schumacher attempted to phase his German rival, but Frentzen was determined not to give this one away. David Coulthard losing oil. Irvine almost slipped up. Fisichella took advantage. And then almost did the same thing himself as he closed on Coulthard. But he recovered in time. Coulthard's engine blew in a big way. Villeneuve into the pits with gearbox problems. Frentzen back out in front, and he was the quickest of the whole field. This is most impressive Grand Prix so far. When he was in for his pit stop, Michael Schumacher briefly took the lead, but he was held up by Nicola Larini in the Sauber, even when he went down the pit lane. Heinz-Harald Frentzen back in first place. Michael Schumacher back out of the pits. Frentzen was in sight of his first win, but Schumacher was determined to test him right to the limit. Eventually, the first win of his 52-race career for Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Villeneuve led the championship by 6 points from Michael Schumacher. And on the podium at Imola, 2 German drivers. Round 5 on the Côte d'Azur and the Monaco Grand Prix. This, the Grand Prix that everyone wants to see. Frentzen, his first pole position, and he was due to start on slicks. Schumacher left his tyre decision as late as possible. The rain clouds came over the mountains. Schumacher had made the right choice. That was proved immediately at the start. A very gingerly approach to Saint-Devote by everyone except Schumacher. He took full advantage. On the slippery streets of the Principality, it was Schumacher and Ferrari celebrating 50 years in Formula One. Out of the tunnel, out of the race, both McLarens gone. Villeneuve steering clear as Irvine, Alesi and Salo mixed it. Villeneuve's pit stop for wet tyres, but too late. A skating rink at the Lowe's hairpin. Ralf Schumacher in a spin and Barrichello up to third. This was the race of the season for Stewart, and for Barrichello the race of his life as he took second place. Villeneuve just wasn't enjoying it at all. Schumacher splashed happily past to lap him. And Villeneuve retired, a miserable day for Williams. But Michael Schumacher was unassailable. He just drove away from the rest, ironically on course for the first Ferrari victory at Monaco since Gilles Villeneuve in 1981. Schumacher's pit stop, it was all going according to plan. Irvine for Ferrari moved up to third ahead of Fisichella. At Stewart, they were ready for their most important pit stop in Formula One so far. And a tricky decision for Ferrari. Should they bring in Irvine, or could he run right through to the finish without a stop? Heinz-Harald Frentzen slithered once too often with the inevitable result. Irvine at Ferrari. They'd settled for third place. Michael Schumacher wasn't infallible, but with a huge lead, it was no more than a chance to play with the car. He was underway again without losing first place. Salo's Tyrrell was on its way to its first point since Monaco 96. The clock ran down, but Michael Schumacher had timed it to perfection. Jean Todt, reward for his efforts in reviving the team. Rubens Barrichello second, the first points for Stewart. Michael Schumacher, his 23rd victory in 90 Grand Prix, and tyres made the difference.
It was fairly easy. I had a good free run from the beginning on. Choose the right tyre, the right setup, the right strategy. Everything went just perfect.
On to Barcelona in Spain, one of the sporting capitals of the whole world. Michael Schumacher was leading the Drivers' Championship, but it was Jacques Villeneuve who took pole position once more, his 5th of the season. Heinz-Harald Frentzen made it a Williams 1-2 again on the front row. David Coulthard and Jean Alesi were on row 2. Michael Schumacher qualified his Ferrari on row 4, so Williams' performance in qualifying gave them control of the start, until Schumacher came charging through. Frentzen dropped back and Villeneuve was about to be engaged by Coulthard. But Villeneuve just held on to first place. Villeneuve first, Coulthard second. Schumacher had moved up from 7th to 3rd. He soon made that second as he swept past Coulthard. McLaren's top speed was certain to be a factor, and the Mercedes engine did its job for Coulthard eventually. Coulthard and Schumacher pitted together. Speed a factor in the pits, and McLaren had the edge there too. Villeneuve pit stop, the team under pressure after calling the wrong shots at Monaco. Benetton pit stop, the unfamiliar position of Alesi as race leader. Panis improving throughout the race and looking a threat again. Villeneuve and Coulthard battling away. This was called off when Coulthard was called into the pits. Any hopes Tyrrell had of a Monaco repeat were dispelled when Salo punctured, and he careered out of the race. Panis in the Prost, testing the pace of the McLaren. The way the Prost team had approached Formula One with real confidence was a revelation. Certainly to David Coulthard, as Panis moved up to 3rd. Frentzen unhappy again, letting Villeneuve through to lap him. Villeneuve into the pits. Michael Schumacher took over the lead. But Schumacher required another pit stop. And with Alesi shooting past him, he was down in 4th place. Irvine was taking his tactics a little too far in the opinions of the stewards, and he was served with a blocking penalty. Villeneuve came home first, the 7th win of his career. Panis second, Alesi 3rd. Villeneuve 3 points ahead of Schumacher in the Drivers' Championship. Round 7, Montreal, the only Grand Prix in North America. Home ground for Jacques Villeneuve. But it was Michael Schumacher on pole position for the first time in the 1997 season. Villeneuve missed out on pole by 0.013 of a second, and on a circuit named after his father, he was going to give Michael Schumacher a major challenge. But the other Ferrari driver, Eddie Irvine, who qualified in the middle of the grid, was involved again in a first lap accident. He was out of the race, and so too was Mika Häkkinen. Schumacher in first place was proving difficult to dislodge. Villeneuve there in second. Behind him, Fisichella and Alesi, Jordan and Benetton 3rd and 4th. Then Villeneuve got it all wrong at the chicane. What a disappointment for him in front of his home crowd. It was a costly mistake by Villeneuve, giving Michael Schumacher every chance to retake the championship lead. Ralf Schumacher hit trouble. A huge impact, but amazingly he escaped unscathed. Fisichella's pit stop before resuming his battle with Jean Alesi. Michael Schumacher in for a pit stop, which gave David Coulthard the lead. Heinz-Harald Frentzen against the Benetton newcomer Alexander Wurz. Panis unlapping himself from Michael Schumacher, who was struggling on blistered tyres. David Coulthard in for a pit stop for the same reason. McLaren would have got him out in under 6 seconds, but he stalled. And Michael Schumacher was the man in just the right place to take full advantage. Desperation for Coulthard. From first, he dropped right out of the points. Meanwhile, Olivier Panis had crashed heavily. Much concern for Alain Prost. No other car was involved. Mechanical failure had projected Panis into the wall. He broke both legs, but made a full recovery. Remarkably so, considering the huge impact as he accelerated towards 160 miles an hour. The race was stopped. Michael Schumacher declared the winner. But Olivier Panis was his main concern, and that of the other drivers too. Michael Schumacher's second win of 1997. Jean Alesi and Giancarlo Fisichella joined him on the podium. Ferrari led by 8 points in the Constructors' Championship. Michael Schumacher by 7 points in the Drivers' Title race. Back across the Atlantic for the French Grand Prix. But it was the Germans who were celebrating after qualifying. Michael Schumacher had captured pole position for the second successive time. Heinz-Harald Frentzen joined him on the front row. And Ralf Schumacher was third on the grid. A German 1-2-3 for the first time in Formula One history. Villeneuve started from fourth for the first time in 1997. From the start, Michael Schumacher first, Frentzen second, and Irvine broke up the German party by taking third. Villeneuve slotted into fourth, Ralf Schumacher back in fifth. Irvine's good start benefited Schumacher by holding off Villeneuve. Nakano in a spin, the Japanese driver under pressure at Prost to score points. A pit stop for Michael Schumacher, which promoted Frentzen to first. Frentzen's stop gave the lead back again, with an extra second as Irvine cut across his bows. Michael Schumacher leading, but Villeneuve was becoming a real threat. He stopped from second place. Schumacher, with the fastest lap, set out to stretch his lead. But the storm clouds were gathering overhead. It was decision time in the pits. Schumacher at his pit stop stayed on slick tyres. Frentzen was due in next. He opted for slicks too. But Jarno Trulli was the first to move on to wet tyres. He was deputising for Panis at Prost. Schumacher's adroit car control failed him. Even he had problems in the tricky conditions, as did Deniz in the Arrows. Irvine and Villeneuve pitted for wet tyres. Villeneuve began his fight back. He needed points with Schumacher leading and clawed his way up to sixth. David Coulthard was the man who was surprised by Villeneuve and Ralf Schumacher. Michael Schumacher was on his way to the checkered flag, but realised his brother needed another lap to be certain of points and let him through. Villeneuve's last gasp dart at Irvine failed. And back on the track, he only just held off Alesi for fourth. Michael Schumacher completed a clean sweep. Pole position, fastest lap, and first place. His 25th victory, equal now with Jim Clark and Niki Lauda. But he insisted on downplaying his championship chances. Across the channel for the British Grand Prix and another massive crowd at Silverstone. Ferrari were leading the championship, but Villeneuve took pole position again for the sixth time in 1997. Heinz-Harald Frentzen joined him on the front row. Hakkinen and Michael Schumacher were on row two. On the parade lap, Heinz-Harald Frentzen was left on the grid and had to relinquish his place on the front row at the start, an advantage for Michael Schumacher. But Villeneuve did his covering job well. Then all his good early work came to nothing when his teammate was involved in a first lap incident. Frentzen out, Katayama out too, and the safety car came into operation. When the race got underway again, it was Villeneuve against Schumacher, followed by the two McLarens. Herbert having a good early race on home ground. Two separate races developed. Villeneuve against Schumacher, and then the rest led by the McLarens. First pit stop for Michael Schumacher. Ferrari never seemed to have a problem. paired with Villeneuve and Williams, this time a wheel nut jammed. The stop dragged on, and it seemed to have scuppered his hopes of another win in the British Grand Prix. Coulthard lost second place to his teammate when he locked up going into the left-hander. Villeneuve challenged Wirtz for third. The next round of pit stops, Alesi and the Benetton in first, Michael Schumacher second. He was leading when the wheel bearing went on his Ferrari. Retirement the only option. Alexander Wirtz briefly held the lead. A bumpy ride for Giancarlo Fisichella. Villeneuve took over first place. His comeback was complete. Irvine retired at the end of the pit lane. Both Ferraris had gone with the same problem. Mika Hakkinen leading, Villeneuve chasing again. It looked odds-on Hakkinen's first victory in Formula One, but he was jinxed. His Mercedes engine blew and Villeneuve went back in front. Villeneuve heading for his 8th victory in 25 Grand Prix and Williams' 100th win in all. Hill picked up his first point of 1997 to the delight of the crowd. And with Villeneuve on the podium, Alesi and Alexander Wirtz. To Schumacher territory for the first time in 1997, but an Austrian on pole position. Gerhard Berger returning after missing 3 Grand Prix after a sinus problem and the death of his father. At the start, Berger needed all his 203 race experience to keep the lead. Fisichella challenged hard, so too did Michael Schumacher. Villeneuve had dropped further down the order. Back in the pack, a collision between Frentzen and Irvine, the number 2s at Williams and Ferrari. They limped back into the pits. Meanwhile, Berger was leading, Fisichella was second, Michael Schumacher third. Villeneuve had dropped back 3 places to 6th. It was a fiery end to Irvine's German Grand Prix. And Frentzen was out too. Berger still first, and even Benetton couldn't believe it. Herbert and Diniz on the stadium approach, but neither of them made it. Berger's pit stop. He went down to 4th, but he wasn't subdued as he had been earlier in the year. Hakkinen soon found out that this was a revitalised Gerhard Berger. Michael Schumacher came in for his first pit stop, followed by Giancarlo Fisichella. Alesi took the shortcut at the chicane. And Magnussen retired with a steaming Stewart. Berger in for his pit stop. So it was Fisichella who took over first place. Villeneuve retired in the gravel. Berger snatched first place back from Fisichella. A brilliant drive by the Austrian veteran. Fisichella's Jordan suffered a puncture and he lost control. Michael Schumacher's second pit stop, 140,000 in the crowd willing him on. Fisichella's valiant effort brought him no points. Berger was first, his first victory since Hockenheim in 1994. Michael Schumacher second to go 10 points clear in the championship. And then he gave Fisichella a lift home. But what a day for Gerhard Berger.
I think I get some special power somewhere. And I think I know from where it's coming, and I'm very, very happy about it.
Round 11, Hungary. In the 200,000 crowd, the Ferrari fans were back on song. Michael Schumacher on pole position for the 3rd time in 1997. Villeneuve alongside him on the front row, and Hill achieved his best qualifying in the Arrows for 3rd. From the start, Hill mounted his challenge from row 2. Suddenly the Arrows had power to compete. Just where had the improvement come from? Michael Schumacher against Damon Hill. Just like 94, 95 and 96 all over again. Villeneuve was chasing after Irvine. Hill inside Michael Schumacher. One of the manoeuvres of the year. Häkkinen went slowly and dropped out of the race, while Michael Schumacher was overtaken by Villeneuve for second. Schumacher pitted from third. Alesi had lost none of his old adventurous style, but he lost 2 places. Pit stop for Villeneuve. And then an important one for Hill at Arrows. Heinz-Harald Frentzen had moved up to first. His strategy might have worked out. He was only due to stop once. But the fire broke out in the engine bay because his fuel cap had flown off. Fisichella trying to get past Michael Schumacher and failing. Another stop for Hill. Arrows' 299th Grand Prix going well. Coulthard overtook Villeneuve and then gave him the place back again before he retired himself. Hill was in sight of a remarkable victory when suddenly he began to slow. Villeneuve seemed certain to catch him before the end. It was a sterling effort, but Hill's gearbox was faulty. He tried to hold off Villeneuve, but couldn't manage it. Villeneuve was through to first place. Villeneuve with the 10 points. Hill had to be satisfied with second, and congratulations all round. But it was Villeneuve's win eventually.
I started pushing again, and when I got towards him, he was going left and right, so I thought he had a broken suspension, but I knew he was going to block me. It was normal on the last lap, so I just went in the grass, and the car was pretty good in the grass.
One of the most romantic tracks in the world, even when it's raining. Ralf Schumacher, though, probably didn't think so after skating off on the parade lap. Villeneuve on pole position, on wet tyres. Conditions perfect for Michael Schumacher. For the first time in Formula One, a safety car start to give the drivers the chance to explore the circuit and seek out the most treacherous spots. When the race was on, Alesi moved up to second ahead of Michael Schumacher, but Schumacher was courageous down the inside of the Benetton. Then he picked off Villeneuve. Fisichella found the power to sail past Alesi. Villeneuve took his lead from Michael Schumacher and changed to intermediate tyres. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was left back in the pack, but improving as the track dried out. Fisichella almost collided with Hill at his pit stop. Michael Schumacher set the fastest lap and then came in for his stop. McLaren and Williams battling again, as Ralf Schumacher on slicks spun and crashed into the barrier. A very lucky young man. He was shaken but unhurt. Alesi in for a pit stop, which left Michael Schumacher with a commanding lead and Villeneuve out of the top 3. Alesi in from second place. The track drying out, Schumacher on full slicks. Villeneuve against Alesi. Frentzen had worked his way back up into the top 4 and was chasing after Häkkinen. Michael Schumacher achieved his 26th Grand Prix victory. Only Prost, Senna, Mansell and Stewart now ahead of him. A career best second place for Giancarlo Fisichella. And also on the podium, Mika Häkkinen, but he was later disqualified for fuel infringements. Michael Schumacher leading the Drivers' Championship and couldn't be overhauled for at least 2 races. Monza, a circuit redolent of motor racing. The Ferrari fans out in force in the 100,000 plus crowd. A former Ferrari driver, Jean Alesi, on pole position for the first time in 1997. Jean Todt with something to smile about, even though Michael Schumacher was starting from 9th place on the grid, his lowest starting position for 2 years. From the start, Alesi broke away, followed by Heinz-Harald Frentzen and David Coulthard. Alesi just 1 win in his career and with his future at Benetton in doubt. But here, he was setting a major example. Villeneuve was in the top 6, but only just. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, the top Williams driver, in 2nd place, with David Coulthard right on his tail. Coulthard the quicker of the 2, and both of them were catching the leader. Under a second, covering the top 3. Villeneuve in early for a pit stop to give some impetus to his 2nd stint. Heinz-Harald Frentzen followed suit. David Coulthard was in trouble with a half spin as he came out of the chicane, but he corrected it so well. Alesi and Coulthard pitted together. And once again, McLaren's pit work was really slick. Michael Schumacher inherited the lead. He'd come up from 9th place, but was then forced to pit stop. Johnny Herbert and Ralf Schumacher together, and that ended with Herbert in the tyre barrier. David Coulthard, having taken the lead at the pit stop, was moving away from Jean Alesi and Heinz-Harald Frentzen. Fisichella was coming into the picture, and Villeneuve now 5th. But it was Coulthard who came home first for his 2nd victory of the season and the 3rd of his career. Alesi claimed 2nd place, Frentzen was 3rd. Villeneuve, importantly, finished ahead of Schumacher. There was little joy for Ferrari at Monza, but they had a party anyway. Michael Schumacher led the Drivers' Championship by 10 points. Ferrari were a point ahead of Williams in the Constructors. The first Grand Prix in Austria since 1987. But the prime mover of the Austrian Grand Prix was languishing down the grid in 18th place. It was Jacques Villeneuve, who claimed his 8th pole position of the year. Alongside him, Mika Häkkinen in his best qualifying of the season, and a surprise on the 2nd row, Jarno Trulli. Michael Schumacher started again from 9th place. Once the lights were off, a race down to the first corner, led by Häkkinen, Trulli into 2nd place. Villeneuve lost ground to Barrichello. Häkkinen held his lead for virtually the whole lap, but then the jinx struck again. A highly unusual 1-2, with Trulli running ahead of Barrichello, till Villeneuve used the full power of his Williams Renault. Villeneuve with the fastest lap of the race. Trulli in for his pit stop from 1st place. Alesi and Irvine in a tangle again. Morbidelli had a ringside view of it. Up front, Michael Schumacher had eased ahead of Heinz-Harald Frentzen, but he'd overtaken under a yellow flag. Villeneuve in for his first pit stop. Heinz-Harald Frentzen and Michael Schumacher followed together. Villeneuve was in front, Fisichella and Trulli squabbling over second. The Jordan man held it. Michael Schumacher was brought in for a stop-and-go penalty for overtaking under the yellow. Villeneuve, Trulli, Coulthard and Frentzen made up the top four, until Trulli's engine blew and he was forced to retire. For a moment, Coulthard was running blind. Michael Schumacher stormed back into the race and harried Barrichello into a mistake. From 7th place, he set about Damon Hill and just elbowed him aside for 6th. Villeneuve completed victory. Schumacher, damage limitation exercise, came home with a point. It was Villeneuve who received the trophy from the film star Michael Douglas. Coulthard and Frentzen alongside him on the podium. At the Nürburgring, Chancellor Kohl was there to support Michael Schumacher, who was in the lead of the championship by a point from Villeneuve with 3 Grand Prix to go. But it was Mika Hakkinen on his 29th birthday who clinched pole by 0.09 of a second from Villeneuve. From the start, the 2 McLarens and the 2 Williams were in the vanguard. The McLarens went ahead. The 2 Williams touched. The 2 Jordans were in trouble. And so too were the 2 Schumachers. A chaotic start, but out of it all, Michael Schumacher was forced into retirement, his brother almost landing on top of him. McLaren's 1 and 2, Villeneuve in 3rd place, Frentzen having dropped back to 12th. Schumacher pulled into retirement. Ralf Schumacher had some explaining to do, not just at Jordan. Meanwhile, Heinz-Harald Frentzen was in a spot of bother with Panis returning to Grand Prix motor racing after his accident in Canada. Hakkinen in 1st place. First pit stop for a McLaren, and then for Villeneuve in the Williams. Coulthard had inherited 1st. But the fastest man on the whole circuit was Heinz-Harald Frentzen, trying to make up ground from the middle. Coulthard was going slower. Mercedes chief Norbert Howe couldn't understand it, and he was totally bewildered when Hakkinen went too. Villeneuve suddenly found himself in 1st place. Alesi was 2nd. It was Coulthard walking back to the pits, demanding explanations this time. Frentzen came out from his pit stop, but couldn't take 2nd from Alesi. Panis returned with a point for 6th place. But this was a crucial win for Jacques Villeneuve, as he retook the lead for the first time in the championship race since Barcelona. Now he was in front by 9 points, with just 2 races to go.
All we need to do now is 1 point more than Michael, as we have more victories than him to win the championship. So that's what will be important.
In Japan, every Formula One driver is a hero, especially when there's a championship at stake. Jacques Villeneuve collected pole position, but he was only able to race under appeal after he'd been disqualified for failing to slow for yellow flags in practice. Villeneuve on pole position, Michael Schumacher alongside him on the front row. The 2 championship protagonists together. Eddie Irvine for Ferrari on row 2. One last glance between the 2 championship rivals before the race began. Villeneuve determined to block Schumacher's path down to the first corner. And he managed it too. Schumacher, though, stayed in touch. Hakkinen in 3rd place, and then Irvine began his charge. Past Häkkinen, past Schumacher, and then past Villeneuve for first. He showed everybody else how it's done with the fastest lap. Irvine and Schumacher pitted virtually together. Villeneuve inherited first place and was then called into the pits. So the race order reverted to Irvine first, Michael Schumacher second, as he swept past Villeneuve. Irvine slowed considerably to let Michael Schumacher catch up and then take over the lead. Great tactics by the two Ferrari drivers. Irvine then proved impossible to pass. Villeneuve into the pits at the same time as Mika Häkkinen, but the stop dragged on. Schumacher thundering through. Frentzen managing to hold off Irvine for second place. Villeneuve down in fifth, challenged by Alesi. Damon Hill played a part. Michael Schumacher was none too keen about the time it took to get past the Arrows man. At the end, a brilliant victory for Michael Schumacher, masterminded by Ferrari. Schumacher first, Frentzen second, Villeneuve down in fifth place. But as he withdrew his appeal, he later lost those 2 points. Williams did win the Constructors' Championship at Suzuka, but it was Schumacher with the whip hand in the drivers' title race. He led Villeneuve by a point with 1 Grand Prix to go. The first race at Jerez for 3 years couldn't have been more important. Supporters for both the championship rivals, Villeneuve on pole again. Schumacher just behind him, but he'd set the same time as had Heinz-Harald Frentzen, who lined up on the second row. Away from the start, Michael Schumacher ahead of Villeneuve, and Villeneuve even lost second place to his teammate Frentzen. Not the start that Villeneuve wanted. Schumacher attempted to pull away from the two Williams drivers. Frentzen waited for his teammate and let him through. Schumacher into the pits. The first stop at Ferrari, the first at Williams by Villeneuve. Up ahead, Heinz-Harald Frentzen and David Coulthard. Frentzen doing his best to slow the race down so that Villeneuve could come back into contention. Villeneuve had a brief look down the inside of Michael Schumacher's Ferrari. Ralf Schumacher let his brother through and then moved aside to let Villeneuve through. Schumacher in for his second pit stop. Villeneuve arrived shortly afterwards. Both stops went smoothly. When battle was rejoined, they were running together once again out on the circuit. Villeneuve looked down the inside once more. Schumacher moved across to block, and it was Schumacher who came off worse. Schumacher retired. Frank Williams was concerned that Villeneuve might be damaged. Michael Schumacher received confirmation that Villeneuve was still going. The view from Schumacher's car. And that was the end of the championship for Ferrari and Michael Schumacher. Villeneuve continued to the finish. Coulthard and Häkkinen chasing. Coulthard let Häkkinen through to second. Villeneuve eased off. Häkkinen took first place. Villeneuve only needed to finish in the points. And Coulthard came through to make it a McLaren 1-2 at the last race of the season. Häkkinen's first Grand Prix victory. McLaren took the win on the day. Williams took the season. Their fifth Constructors' Championship in 6 years. Häkkinen's first Grand Prix victory in 96 attempts. A new World Drivers' Champion, Jacques Villeneuve. He'd won the title by 3 points, though after the FIA tribunal met to discuss the events at Jerez, Michael Schumacher had his second place taken away. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, third for Williams. Eddie Irvine, 8th for Ferrari. 16 points for Olivier Panis, despite that terrible accident. Jarno truly promised so much during the season and will be with Prost full-time in 1998. As far as the constructors are concerned, Williams won by the margin in the end of 21 points. Benetton, McLaren, Jordan, Prost and Sauber all in double figures, but some distance away. 97 belonged to Williams and Villeneuve.
The championship feels great now. It's been an up and down season. We've been the most competitive team since the beginning of the season, but there's been many races where we didn't get the job done. I made a few mistakes, the team made a few mistakes, and then somehow things didn't go right when they should have gone right. So to win it here after the disqualification of Suzuka feels great.